Hi, first and fourth hour. I'm using this platform to give a short lecture on the topic we'll be covering this week, probability. I want you to think of when you've heard the term probability before. Maybe you've heard someone say, it'll probably happen. Well, mathematicians like us don't like fuzzy things like maybe or probably. Mathematicians have assigned a numerical value to probability and quantify it. So when someone says, it'll probably happen, a mathematician wants to know exactly how likely it is. So the study of probability is quantifying that term. Can you think of some examples of probability? The chances that something will happen. Probabilities are usually written three different ways. The first is with fractions. Fractions have, with values from 0 to 1, define a ratio, and that's how we determine probability. But not everyone likes fractions. Fractions can be turned into decimals, so the equivalent decimals is also a way to discuss probability. If we need to do calculations with probability, that's the best way to express them. Another way to express probability is with a percent. We can find a fraction, we can turn it into a decimal, and then we can change it to a percent. And the reason we do this is because percents are so easy to understand. Remember, percents are kind of like the metric system. They're base 100 fractions. So probability, how likely is it that something will happen? Here is a range of different options of probability. It's between 0% and 100%. If that gets translated into a decimal, it's between 0 and 1. Let's look at the different chances. I'm sure you've heard someone said there's a 50-50 chance. That means 50% probability. It can also be expressed as a fraction 1/2. Look carefully at that 1/2. The numerator is 1, the denominator is 2. Sometimes people talk about fractions like this, 1 out of 2. That also sounds like a 50-50 chance. Let's explore this a little bit further. Can you think of things that have a probability of 100% chance that they'll happen? Do you have things in your life that will have a probability of 0% happening? And do you have things that might have an equal chance? It's equally likely that they'll happen or not happen. Let's do some calculations. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the way it's written. The probability of an event is called the P of an event. The numerator of a fraction is going to be the number of ways that event can occur. The denominator is the total possible number of outcomes. The event is a specific event of a probability experiment. So here's an example. When rolling a number cube, in my classroom we call it a dice, when rolling a number cube, the event of rolling a 4 is 1 out of 6. If we were in our classroom, you know that one of the days we'd be playing Yahtzee. The chance of rolling a 4 is 1 out of 6. So if we were flipping coins, what is the probability of getting heads when flipping a coin? So again, we go for the fraction. The probability of flipping heads is 1 desired outcome out of possible 2 outcomes. Expressed as a decimal is 0.5. Expressed as a percent, it's 50%. There's a 50-50 chance when you flip a coin that you'll get heads. So here's 3 for you to try. Number 1, what's the probability that the spinner will stop on part A? That's this part right here. Express it as a fraction. Number 2, what is the probability that the spinner will stop on part A here? Express it as a fraction. Remember, those 3 parts have to be identical 3 parts. It's as equally likely that it will land on A, B, or C. Part 3 has 2 parts. What is the probability the spinner will stop on A, an even number, if all of these three sections are identical. Part B, what is the probability it will stop on an odd number? If you look at those two fractions side by side, a light bulb might come on. 1/3 and 2/3, that adds up to 1, which is like 100%. So if we wanted an answer that had 100%, we would ask the question, what is the probability that the spinner will stop? 100%. Here's some more problems. Let's take a look at the first one. There are 100 incoming 9th grade students next fall and 5 math teachers. Let's assume each math teacher gets the exact same amount of new students. What is the chance a student will have me as their math teacher? If you look on the screen, you'll see the fraction already made for you. The numerator is the desired outcome. The denominator is the total possible outcomes. I hope you don't think one is a trick question. The part about 100 incoming 9th graders has nothing to do with this problem because it's not the total possible outcomes. The number that belongs here is the total number of math teachers, 5. The numerator, what are the chances that an incoming 9th grader will have me as their math teacher? 1. So the answer to number 1 is 1 out of 5. Let's look at number 2. A sack contains 18 red marbles, 4 blue marbles, and 1 white marble. All the marbles are the exact same size and feel exactly the same, and the sack, you can't see into it. But what is the probability that if you put your hand into the sack and choose 1 marble, that marble will be red? You can use the same fraction as above. Remember to put the desired outcome in the numerator and the total possible outcomes in the denominator. I like to start these problems with the denominator. There's the denominator, 23 total marbles. That's the number that goes in the denominator. What are the chances that the marble pulled will be red? Well, there are 18 red marbles. So that's why fractions are extremely accurate when determining probability. If you wanted to make that a little more understandable, you would turn it into a decimal or a percent. Let's move on. Here's a word problem. Sam is the captain of his track team. The team is deciding on a color, and all 8 members wrote their choices down on equal size cards. If Sam picks 1 card at random, what is the probability he will pick blue? Let's use a fraction. There are 8 possible outcomes. If you look at the cards, you'll see that there are 3 blue cards. So the chances will be 3 out of 8, or 0.375, or 37.5% that Sam will pick blue for t-shirts for his track team. So that was a brief introduction into probability. As you go forward in your life, you'll find this to be a very useful topic. You'll see it again and again. So I want to just give you a little bit of background information as to what we're working on in our math class. The type of probability we're talking about is classical probability. This is what's important when talking about classical probability. Number 1, all of the outcomes are known in advance. And number 2, all of the outcomes are equally likely. It's a little more complicated when the outcomes have different weights. It's still doable, but that's not something we're going to explore at this point. We're going to look at the classical methods. Now, as you go out in the real world, you'll see other kinds of methods. Here's the second kind of method, the relative frequency method. It's used when all probable outcomes are not known in advance, and the outcomes are not equally likely. They're relative. So an example of this is how a store owner would place orders. Sometimes stores buy the exact same amount they did last year because they think last year will be just like this year and it'll be just like next year. That's the relative frequency method. They're frequently identical. The third way to look at probability is the subjective method. This is when the outcomes are not known in advance and the probabilities are not equally likely and there's no similar statistical data. This is where people who use this base, instead of on numbers, they base their probability on opinion, on previous experience, on knowledge. That's why it's called subjective. An example of this would be your base advisor. Your base advisor has had previous experience and gives advice to you based on that previous experience. Even though you are one of a kind, there's no similar statistical data for you. So let's review. What's probability? It's the chance that something will happen. It's a number. It's the ratio of the number of ways a certain event can occur to the number of possible ways that it can occur. The probability of events is the desired outcome compared to the total possible outcomes. It can be written as a fraction, which is the most accurate, a decimal, which is the easiest to calculate with, or a percent. You're ready to do our homework? So continue on in the Pear Deck and complete the next 6 problems for classwork today. That's all for now.